hear me clearly? Just, I think a few people responding. Good, good. It sounds like everyone can hear me. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And I hope I'll be able to share some useful ideas and examples with you. I work for Epic Learning. We're an e-learning company based down in Brighton on the south coast of England. And we've been creating e-learning and mobile learning particularly for the last 10 years or so. So what I want to do today is take you through some of the examples and ideas and approaches that we've used, and hopefully there'll be some useful ideas in there that you may want to adapt for your own circumstances. But first, I'd like to hear from you. So if we could just go to a poll. Let me just move that across. So it would be great if you could vote and share with the group how many devices you use in a typical day.
We have a combination of people either responding in chat or on the device, so I'm going to just broadcast the results now, I think, Imogen.
Great, thank you, Donald. You see those results there? So that's interesting. So pretty much the vast majority of people are using 2, 3, 4 or even 5 devices in a typical day. And I don't think that's unusual today. We're all switching very rapidly between devices as we work, and that's the way that the way we use technology at work has been changing over the last 5 to 10 years. So moving on from that poll, it would be great if you could share what sort of devices those might be with the group. And again, I think we have a poll. We move that across. Oh, can everyone see that? Perfect.
Andrew's asking, what about laptop? I think laptop just comes under the bracket of PC.
Yes, sorry, I thought I was thinking laptop as under PC, indeed.
I appreciate that they're not all the same.
Indeed.
Okay, let's broadcast the results.
Great. So again, I think what we can see here is that we're using devices from a number of different suppliers. So there's quite a big vote there for Apple. Lots of people with Apple phones and almost as many with Apple tablets. Even more people with Android phones, slightly fewer with an Android tablet. Most people using a PC of some kind, and I appreciate that might be a laptop or a desktop PC or an Apple MacBook. And we've got a few people using BlackBerry phones, which may or may not be smartphones, and a very small percentage there using a BlackBerry tablet. But I think that brings us to the nub, perhaps, of some of the challenges of designing mobile learning, because we're talking here about a great number of devices. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is some of the approaches that we've taken to these designing for these devices. I'm going to talk to you first about multi-device courses, just-in-time mobile learning, mobile gaming, and mobile performance support. And in each case, I'm going to share some examples with you so that you can get a feel, some case studies, so you can get a feel for what those implementations might look like. So, multi-device courses. As we said, as we've seen, we're using a number of different operating systems, Android, Apple, Microsoft, maybe BlackBerry as well, and we're using devices of a variety of different shapes and sizes. So before I get into talking about sharing some case studies with you, I'm just going to go through some of the design challenges that entails. So to start with, we're talking about different operating systems, different underlying programming languages, and there are two options for producing mobile learning apps that can work across operating systems. And the first one is to produce an HTML5 mobile web app. So that's really just like a web page, but you can make it a SCORM object, you can host it on a learning management system, and it will open on the user's mobile device just like a web page. Obviously, you need some connectivity for that to happen, but it's a fairly straightforward way of making sure that your course can be accessed on multiple devices and multiple operating systems. The other option is to create, oh, I'm hearing that some people are struggling to hear. Can most people hear? Has the sound dropped off? Yeah, it looks like, okay, so it's good for most people.
Yeah, but don't worry about the sound, Imogen. I'll deal with it.
Okay.
You carry on the
Okay,
presentation.
sure.
We've got 120
Sure.
people online. Almost
Right,
certainly
okay.
it's an isolated thing.
Just
I'm going to try to tackle that. Take us through native
Great.
apps.
Okay, so native apps. So native apps are downloaded onto the user's device. So once they're there, they're run directly from the device, and once you've downloaded them, you don't need connectivity. The advantages of that are that you can run richer media, such as video and audio, without necessarily needing to worry about bandwidth, and you can use some of the features of the device, such as GPS, motion sensors, or calendars. The challenges are that obviously they have to work for the different operating systems. So, so those are some of the thoughts around native and web apps. In terms of different screen sizes, you need to think about responsive design. To give a very simple overview of responsive design, here's a Word document. Having resized it, you can see that it is the words have actually wrapped for the new shape and size. The same can be done with a web page. This is an example of the Epic web page, and as you can see, it's the same web page, but it's organized differently for different devices, so that it's easy to actually access the web page even if you're on a much smaller device such as a smartphone. If you've ever tried to use a web page that isn't optimized in that way, you'll know how annoying it is. You either have to shrink it down or you can only see part of it each time. So as web pages, so multi-device e-learning. If you want to create e-learning SCOs or short courses or resources which can be viewed across devices, you need to think about how the interactions will actually work on those multiple devices, as you can see here. So the case study I'd like to share with you is from civil service learning. They have, as you can see, hundreds of thousands of civil servants. Many of them are working in operational delivery, providing services to people on the front line. So when they were designing some of their short and modular e-learning courses, they wanted to give people the option to switch between devices as they took those courses, so that they might start a course on perhaps one device and then move on to another device. So I want to very briefly share with you what that might look like. So I'm going to share my screen, if I can. And hopefully you can all see that there, and you can see how this one course is laid out in a different way on the smartphone. If you answer the question, you can see the feedback appearing in one way on the larger device.
Just 1 second. Imogen. It's not coming up yet for me on my screen. It's still loading.
Is that okay?
Ditto for other people. So you're describing something we
Okay.
can't see.
See.
I think we have
Okay.
a loading issue. Can you?
Yeah,
It's
I
not
will.
happening to me. I think let's put this to one side and carry on if that's okay.
That's absolutely fine. So if we move back, you can see there how the menu is arranged differently for the different devices, and I think I showed you a couple of screens ago. You can see there how the feedback might pop up on a smartphone if you look at the smartphone device, whereas it might more typically pop up to the side on a larger device. So that perhaps gives you an idea of how multi-device responsive design might look in practice. In terms of civil service learning, the courses have been very popular. The civil service take constant feedback, and people have been very positive about in answering questions about whether the course met the published objectives or whether it improved their knowledge or skills. So these courses have really been a great success, and people have been taking them up on the mobile devices, more commonly on smartphones than on tablets. But they like the option to be able to access devices, access the courses through mobile devices if they want to.
Imogen, can I just quickly ask a question? On that slide where you say level 1 and 2, what does the level refer to?
Oh yes, so I was, sorry, yes, referring to Kirkpatrick, so looking at sort of people taking the e-learning, what they report in terms of whether they felt the course met their public, whether they found the course helpful, whether they felt it had improved their knowledge or skills.
Okay, thanks.
So again, we've created a similar course for multi-device course for the Resuscitation Council. I'm not going to try and share the solution with you because I think we'll probably have similar issues with loading. So I'll just move on and describe it to you. What I was going to share with you was that if you're showing a very rich image, you'll need to think about how that works. And we had a nice little ticker tape image that you could see on the larger screen. It was an ECG reading, and we took a very different approach to showing that on a smaller screen, so you could actually click on it and zoom in on it and magnify it. So there needs to be some thinking that goes into multi-device course design. But again, this was very well received by learners when we asked whether they found the course helpful, you can see there that from the scale of 1 to very good and 6 to disagree, very poor, they felt that this course was helping them. We also got quite a lot of feedback that people very much enjoyed being able to take it at home, where and when they wanted. So I think key takeaways of multi-device course design, you can host, if you design as a web app, you can host your learning on an LMS, a learning management system. You can track it in the same way as you would an e-learning SCO, and you can use responsive design to make sure that it works equally well across devices. So it would be great now if you could, before we move on, if you could share what you think perhaps are the benefits of multi-device courses, what you think the drawbacks might be.
And while everyone's responding, I've got to say, we've been creating a huge number of questions already, Imogen. I'm holding those back for the moment because I want to label you to get some momentum up and carry on with what's a great presentation. A lot of stuff to get through at the end, Imogen. I've got to tell you, really good questions coming through. But look at these. The benefits of multi-device courses, well, you can see, Imogen, the sort of themes coming out here. Immediacy, flexibility, globally, says Minnie Pagnelli, very important. Lots of thoughts, though, about drawbacks. Small screen size, the drawbacks, is the technology right? It has been used across 5,000 people. So are you expecting those sorts of answers, Imogen? Anything new there?
Yeah, no, I think that's very, those seem like common concerns and something that we can perhaps discuss towards the end of the presentation.
Yeah, please keep the thoughts coming, everybody.
Great, yeah, perfect. I'll move on. So I want to move on now to talking about just-in-time learning. So Google have done some research about how people use different devices, and people tend to use smaller smartphone devices to browse, to dip in and dip out, and move to larger devices when they want to do something more extended. So for example, if they're shopping, they might actually make the purchase on a larger device. And there's some evidence that people want to learn, to do similar things with learning. So when you're thinking of actually designing for a large mobile workforce, you may not want to just offer e-learning courses that can be accessed on mobile devices. You may want to think about how people actually use some of those devices. And one way to do that is just-in-time learning. So people may have an upfront course, but they may want a just-in-time refresher before they go into an activity. So that could be a salesperson who's going to check some of the features of their product just before they go in to meet the client. The case study I want to show you is something that we made for HarperCollins, the global publisher. As you can see, they have a wide range of books that they offer, and one of the things that they offer are maths revision guides for UK GCSE students. So that's a sort of high school age students. So this gives you a bit of an overview of what those maths revision guides look like. As you can see, they're fairly hefty, 400 pages, 1,400 questions, 1,200 examples. So a really great asset, but obviously they're not so easy to carry around. So in 2010 we partnered with HarperCollins to make some just-in-time revision guides. And as you can see, these are very granular. They let people jump straight into an area of interest to them. And when they actually get in, they can see a revision flashcard that looks a little bit like this. They've got the option to watch a small video that covers the key points. They can read some text that gives them text and images that gives them, again, an overview of the key points. And they've got the opportunity to practice by answering a couple of questions and getting some immediate feedback. So it's very much a sort of revision guide. We did a lot of focus groups and testing with the children, and one of the things they said, which is a bit worrying, I don't learn anything from a book. This is interactive, so I can learn I'm actually doing something. But it's been very, very popular, and I think to date there have been more than 35,000 downloads, so it's been extremely popular. It's something they can dip in and dip out of on the bus or whenever they've got a spare moment to fit their revision into snatches of time. It's always there with them. So again, key takeaways: smartphones are different. People tend to use them differently, perhaps for shorter time frames. So it's certainly worth thinking resources, perhaps rather than fully fledged courses. Now I want to move on from here to talk about mobile games-based learning. Again, as part of a blend, as part of a course which has other elements, a casual game can be a very valuable component to help people practice and master some of the key elements of what they need to do. So the examples I want to share with you here are some pilots that we created with the British Army in 2008. So the British Army do a lot of training. As you can see here, about 75% of soldiers join an apprenticeship scheme, and they're taught things like engineering, information and communications technologies, and construction. And they also have to have a certain level of maths and English to actually go on to those training courses. And if they don't have that level when they join, they go to classes to bring them up to that level. So one of the courses, games that we created accompanied a vehicle mechanics course, and it consisted of a series of quizzes. You could move up through various levels, from being a rookie to being, I think, an engineering god. There were games where you had to fix a vehicle against the clock. You had to make various decisions. You had to examine components and decide if they were rusted. You lost lives if you didn't get it right. So it was a fun way of embedding the learning that they were doing in the classroom. And games-based learning, it was a good fit for this target audience because it involved repeat practice, so they were keeping on having a go, they wanted to better their scores. It gives immediate feedback, which you don't get necessarily from a book or a workshop that you might have, a worksheet that you might have taken back to the barracks. It gives a sense of friendly competition, of challenge, because you can see whether you're doing better when you're better than your mates. So the other game that we created for the Army was Operation Numerica, and this was to help the people who were really struggling with their maths training. They were sending these guides, if they were struggling to keep up with the maths in the classroom, they were having to go back to the barracks with lots of worksheets to keep up. So this was to design a game where they could move up through levels, play against the clock, and collect points, and they really enjoyed it. As you can see, this guy saying using the Nintendo is great, it makes it less hard work and more like a game because you can try and beat your last score. So key takeaways, the convention in gaming is that you expect to work, that you want to work. So if people are tackling a subject where there's quite a lot of work to do to master some of the underlying components, casual games on a mobile device that you can dip in and dip out of can be a very valuable way of encouraging practice. So it'd be good to share if anyone here is already using any techniques from games. It would be great if you could share with the group what sort of techniques you're using or what your thoughts are.
Yes, we could share not only techniques people are using, but also what they might think about using games, and plenty of discussion going on about mobile in different forms. Love to see the thoughts about gaming being brought in here. I know people have been saying that they'd like to use as much of the capability of mobile devices as possible, rather than simply having people reading off them. So let's see what people think about it. Imogen, great job so far. Loads of really rich, practical examples. Love it.
Great. Well, I'm going to move on. I want to leave, because I've seen lots of really interesting thoughts, to leave some time at the end for discussions. But I'm going to move on now to the fourth and final thing that I wanted to share with you today, and that's talking about using mobile devices for on-the-job performance support. So we've talked about using mobile delivery for upfront courses where you might be training someone on something for the first time, letting people get their e-learning via a mobile device if that's more convenient. And we've talked about mobile to deliver just-in-time learning, so that's cementing perhaps something you've already learnt, having a refresher just before you need to put it into action. And I've talked about using games as part of a blend, as part of a course, to help reinforce, to help people master some of the components of a longer course that they might be undertaking. So on-the-job performance support is about using your mobile device to help you do something there and then. So that might be, for example, going back to the salesperson who might have been checking some of the components of some of the things that they were selling just before they met the client. In this example, they might be using the mobile device to take the client through some of the key features as they speak to them. So they're actually using the performance support on the job rather than just before doing it. So in terms of designing support resources, what sort of things might we deliver via mobile devices? So it could be quick reference, it could be the opportunity to look something up. We all like to Google things. It could be some sort of diagnostic tool or calculator that can help you do something better. It might be a how-to guide, a video, a demonstration, somebody talking about something that they'd done and how they did it. Or it could be some sort of job aid or checklist. And just to show you what those sorts of things might look like, you can see some examples there. So that one at the bottom is a demo of how to set up a LinkedIn profile, for example, and there you can, and to the right you can see you can launch sort of videos and checklists and explanations. So I undertook some research on mobile learning for NHS workers in 2012. If you're interested, we can share those with you. You can find those on our knowledge base, which I'll share with you towards the end of the presentation. As you can see there, the unfeasibly good-looking doctors on the left, we asked them if they felt that having access to mobile learning would help them, and you can see they were broadly in agreement. The figures on the right tell you what the managers thought about it, so they thought it was even more useful. And when we asked them what types of mobile learning they would find to be of most benefit, performance support was by far the most popular. So that was the thing that most people wanted. And what might that look like? This is an example. So this is a just-in-time mobile job aid, SBAR. So this is a protocol for having emergency conversations. So you need to think situation, background, assessment and recommendation. And it's basically a reminder to make sure that people don't forget to tell their colleagues key pieces of information when they're changing shifts, so that people know what they need to know about a patient. Now this is interesting, I think, because this used to be a paper job aid, so it used to be something you could carry around in your pocket as a wallet card, and now it's been moved to a mobile phone, and you can obviously you're less likely to accidentally put it through the wash, hopefully, and you can perhaps move through it and access it more quickly. Another example is something that we created. This is a fault-finding app, so this was it was part of the same course on vehicle mechanics that we created as a pilot for the Army, but this component of it was meant to be used actually as they were starting to fix vehicles. It's a little bit like a mobile Haynes manual. It asks you questions, you can follow down the tree, and then when it gets to the end, it makes a suggestion and it gives you some tips for making the fix that it is suggesting that you do. In terms of the SBARD acronym, I think that stands for Situation, Background, Assessment, Recommendation. I'm afraid I can't remember. There was an SBAR and an SBARD, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the D stood for, but I can get back to you on that. Sort of to conclude that section, it would be good to know what you think might be useful to your organisation and your learners in terms of performance support, if anything.
Of course, I have the benefit of being able to see the results as they come in. It's fascinating, these, and we'll share them very shortly.
Yes, indeed. There's quite a lot of enthusiasm there, which is great.
Okay, let's show the results.
So there, as we can see, I think a lot of people are saying all of the above. These would all be useful. I think the most popular there is how-to guides, job aids, quick reference guides. You know, all of these can be extremely useful, and if you're delivering them to a mobile device, people will have their mobile device with them most of the time. It's always on. It tends to always have connectivity, so it's a great way of making sure they can get that support. And if they're out and about, if they're an electrician trying to restore the electricity supply after a storm like we're having here in the UK today, it's really useful to have that sort of thing with them so that they can just refer to it if they're unsure what to do. Okay, shall we move on? Great. So I just thought it would be interesting to share for those in the group who are already offering some type of mobile performance support, if they could perhaps share any of the benefits and challenges that you're seeing. It'd be really good to hear from people.
Yeah, always good to get people's actual factual experiences and share those. We had a great example of that this morning with Andy Jones sharing some of the problems that he's had rather than just the great successes.
Yeah,
Claire's
indeed.
pointing out that, as we might expect, access is sometimes a problem.
Yeah. Yes. access can be quite a challenge. Oh, sorry, I thought I'd put an extra slide in there. But I think access is a challenge, connectivity, and I think for performance support, it's actually quite important to be thinking perhaps about a native app, because then you can download it once and you can access it without needing Wi-Fi connectivity. So you only need the Wi-Fi to download the app in the first place. And that's an approach we've taken with some apps that we've created for the NHS, which you can find on the App Store if you're interested. And I did some research for the e-learning guild earlier this year, looking at case studies of mobile learning, and there was a very impressive app that the Red Cross have made, where you can actually get just-in-time first aid help if you find yourself suddenly needing to use it. And obviously that is a native app, because you really don't want to be worrying about connectivity issues under those circumstances. So I think, oh yes, someone's saying the Red Cross app is brilliant. I couldn't agree more. I've got it on my phone and I recommend that everyone should have it. Okay, so I'm going to move to the because we've got lots of really great thoughts here. I'm going to move to the end of the presentation so that we can perhaps have more of a discussion about some of these questions and ideas. So really just an overview of what I've shared with you today. So if you're designing an e-learning course, if you're about to set out designing an e-learning course, consider making it multi-device. So if you make an HTML5 web app, you can host that on a learning management system just as you might for a standard e-learning course. And if you use responsive design, it will then be accessible across a variety of mobile devices. There are a number of authoring tools out there now that allow you to create multi-device learning. If you want to use responsive design, make sure your authoring tool does actually do that. But yet, consider just-in-time learning. People do use smartphones differently. Not everyone wants to wade through an entire course on a smartphone. People probably want to dip in and dip out of them on a smartphone. But yet, consider a just-in-time component, because smartphones are different, they're used differently, they tend to be used for shorter time frames. So think about resources. And in terms of games, if you're doing a course where there's quite a lot to master, people are quite time poor, including a casual game might help them take the found time to put in enough practice to master something that doesn't come perhaps easily to them. And finally, I think performance support is something that most learners ask for if you ask them what they'd really like to have on a mobile device. If you're considering performance support, you do need to think about connectivity, because the essence of performance support is that it's there very quickly when and where you need it, and you don't want to be worrying about connectivity issues. Time is of the essence. So if you're interested, if you'd like to know more about any of the things that I've talked to you about today, if you go to EPIC's knowledge base, you'll find that we have a whole selection of white papers and insights on things such as how to get started in responsive design, what to consider if you're developing a bring your own device policy, if you want to allow people to use their own personal mobile devices to access your work related learning, and a whole bunch of other things, how to, as a designer, how to design for mobile learning, how to develop a mobile learning strategy. So there's, and the NHS report that I mentioned is also available from there. So please do feel free to go and have a look at those things. And I think it would be great now if we could perhaps pick up on some of those questions and insights that have been shared during the presentation. Donald, do you want to summarise some of those?
Before I say anything else, I've got to say, Imogen, thank you very much. I had my doubts when I saw your slide deck, which was very rich and full, that you were going to get through it. You cracked through it without missing anything, with precision. Just thank you for that. Quick question. Carl G asks, what is a native app? Of course, we perhaps go in with assumptions, but Imogen, can you quickly just define web-based design, native app? What's the difference? What are the key considerations for choosing one or the other?
Yeah, sure. So HTML5, it's much easier to quickly target all the devices, and it tends to be slightly cheaper and easier. You'll find more authoring tools that will output simple HTML5 apps. You can also turn it into an e-learning SCO, so you can host it on a learning management system and track it. If you're creating a native app, it will be downloaded directly to your mobile device, which means it will live locally, which means it can work without connectivity, which is certainly going to be an advantage if you're wanting to offer something like performance support. It can also interact, if you want it to, with the native features of your device, such as things like GPS or calendar, should you want it to, and you can deploy it from an app store like the Apple or the Android store, should you want to do that. So if it was something you wanted to make available to the wider public. So I think that's a sort of overview. There are always sort of caveats and more things that you can say, but that's a brief overview of the difference.
Lovely. I think the key thing there for me is the differences are valid. You have people rallying for one side or the other, do one, do the other. Of course, it does rather depend what you're trying to do. So trying to push away through the zealots and get to the core of what the issues you're trying to tackle. Can a native app report back to an LMS? Maureen asked, and the question is yes, it depends on how you are setting things up. The answer is yes, you can. I think one of the key considerations there is always around cost. But let's not get bogged down unless everyone wants to do it in the app stroke native web discussion for the moment. I want to go back to some of the questions we had earlier. Ian asked a couple of ones really early on, were very useful about the case studies that you had. When clients decide to engage in creating mobile learning, do they assume that all potential users have a smartphone or tablet? That, of course, plays to the wider question of accessibility. So can you tell us, Imogen, about what clients have in their heads when they do it, and then very often what the reality is?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. It really does depend. Some clients will know that they've issued devices to their workforce, and they know exactly what devices their workforce have been issued for work. So that obviously makes it very straightforward because you know exactly what you're targeting. More commonly, though, we're seeing that people are thinking that people want to use their own devices, and therefore it's a bring your own device question. And do they assume that they've all got mobile devices? Generally not. Generally, people are offering mobile as an option if they're not sure if everybody has a smartphone. Sometimes they're actually asking us to work with them to do research. So when we work with the NHS, we actually polled people to see how many people had devices and what sort of devices they have. And that's pretty quick and easy to do. So it's certainly something I'd recommend. It's always good to talk to your learners and find out what it is that they would like and would benefit from. Having that sort of dialogue is invaluable. But quite often these things are optional add-ons. So we're not assuming that people have to have their own have a mobile device.
And that's another question, of course, isn't it? Can you make mobile learning compulsory as part of an implementation? Can you just quickly talk about some of the considerations around that, because it is something that anyone designing a course will want to think about?
Sure. I think you can't. It seems unreasonable to make it compulsory unless you're providing your workforce with devices that they can use to take it, because then you'd be basically asking them to go out and buy their own smartphone or use their own smartphone. Generally, when we've talked to people, they're actually very keen to learn on their own, using their own devices, because they find it more convenient than having to carry around two devices everywhere, their own and a work-issued device. But I would say you can only really make it compulsory if you know that you're issuing devices. And I think another thing to say is that if people are going to be downloading your content onto their personal device, they're going to be using their own data plan to pay for the download. So that's something else you want to consider. You might want to warn them. Some of the CSL, for example, courses warn people that if they're because they're actually mobile apps, they warn people that if you're not on Wi-Fi, you might end up paying to download the data. So I think it's quite important to warn people about that sort of
It is
thing.
a fair point. I know one organisation in the States that has successfully made e-learning over mobile devices as a performance support tool compulsory, but they provide Wi-Fi in their offices, which are restaurants. So the managers have this this app on their phones, which is connected via the Wi-Fi. So the Wi-Fi, the data plan is free, but they have to bring their own device to access it. Sorry, go on.
No, so that's an option. I was just going to say, in the US, people have to pay to receive text messages as well as to send them. So that's also a consideration if you're using text as part of your program.
Or perhaps we should just go and work for mobile phone providers in the US, because it sounds like a recipe for money.
Yes,
Question coming up about design here, Imogen. Small screens, what can you do with them, and can you get the same attention on a video or text or interactivity on a small screen that you can on something that's on a tablet or on a PC? So that's really not so much about mobile, but about the size of the screen that might be on your mobile device. Any thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So videos, I think people do attend to with the same, almost the same level of concentration as on a smaller device as on a larger device. I don't know if any of you have ever been on a train where you've seen someone watching a comedy show or a film on their smartphones, but you can certainly see them quite happily whiling away an hour or two in that way. In terms of interactive courses, obviously the screen size is smaller. It won't be suitable for everyone. On a tablet, however, you're looking at something that's almost the same size as a PC, and I think people are more likely to concentrate for longer. I agree. I don't. Having spoken to people that we've asked to use mobile devices, generally people don't want to spend a long time concentrating on an actual course on a smaller screen. But what they do want to do is sometimes dip into the course or maybe finish something up that they got 80% of the way through at work, and then they want to finish it up on the train on the way home so they know they've done it. So they are tending to dip in and out on the smaller device.
I think that's a really good point. The smaller the device, the more likely it is it's used as something which you dip in and out of at a moment of convenience. And if you can't get it instantly, and if it lasts more than 2 minutes, then you're unlikely to get somebody's attention for that process. Burak, Merhaba Burak, welcome to the webinar, says, in Turkey, we're using mobile apps with their own LMS. There's a bit of discussion going on, Imogen, about apps and LMSs. And he's saying that some of these apps come with their own LMSs, which is great, but of course I think lots of people would prefer to have one LMS for everything rather than having 2 separate ones. Quick question here now about courses and mobile devices. There's 2 things here. Firstly, Andrew Jacobs was saying that he's concerned that we're trying to push the paradigm of pushing stuff out to people through smaller and smaller devices, and you can't really run a course, and he's perhaps suggesting on a mobile device. If you're not running a course, what are you using mobile devices for as well as performance support? I think we can take performance support for granted, but for longer term learning, what sort of things are you using it for, Imogen?
So I think it can work very well as part of a blend. So we're designing a course which might involve classroom sessions and an e-learning course or a variety of e-learning courses, or even a portal. But then there are elements of that people want to reinforce, and maybe not just as performance support, but they just want to sort of dip in and dip out of. So another example of perhaps a mobile learning game. There was a course that we created for people from a non-financial background who needed to master some concepts in finance, and it was quite a long and extensive course, and we made a game which allowed them to get to grips with all the acronyms and new words. So it was just a sort of, it was an acronym mastery game, and it had a series of balloons that floated up to definitions, so that the terms floated up to the definitions and you had to pop them if they didn't match. It was quite fun, and the idea was that you could sort of play around with that if you had a snatch of time on your mobile device, and it would help you to sort of master all the acronyms and new terminology that you needed to actually follow the course. And then that made following the course much quicker because you didn't have to keep stopping and looking things up all the time. So that's an example. Or it might be that you've got some video insights that you make available through the mobile devices so people can just refresh those from time to time.
Love it. Very similar illustration from Alexandra, who said you can use mobile, start to live it over mobile devices to give people an idea, stimulate people before they get to whether it's e-learning or classroom learning, whatever, as a teaser as well as a follow-up and a support during the event. Quick observation from Stephen, who says, look, mobile is just the wrong term to use. Got a laptop, got 3G card, he's mobile, and then use my iPad slumped on the couch. Probably, he says, we should be talking about multi-device for the future. I think I tend to agree with him. More questions coming up. If you've got a lot of media, particularly video, which is going to be very bandwidth hungry, how much is that an issue that we need to think about, Imogen? If we are giving people devices and we don't have to worry about a data plan, are there other considerations with bandwidth?
Well, if you're not worrying about the data plan, you obviously want people to be able to use that video smoothly, to see it immediately, not to have to wait for it to play. So that's a connectivity issue, really. If you're going to be streaming it from somewhere else to their mobile, even if they're not paying for the data, they're not going to enjoy an experience where they can't easily see the video. If you create a native app, that can be downloaded directly to their device. Obviously, if that includes a lot of video, the download to the device may be a little slower, and it will take up slightly more space on the device. But I suppose those are the considerations. Also, I guess where people are using it, because obviously video and audio require headphones. So if you think people are going to be dipping into it in crowded places, then that may not be so appropriate.
Yeah, particularly if it's secure information. And of course, we have the issue of security. I don't know we've dealt with that so far. So quickly, Imogen, can you just tell us about a key consideration people have? We're going to give people this stuff. It's, for example, on that, it's on their iPad. What if they lose the iPad? So how could an organisation deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it slightly depends on whether that's a work-issued device, in which case your organisation will tend to have a whole protocol for dealing with those sorts of things that is likely to already be in place for people who are working on their laptops, because this has been an issue for some time. There's always the possibility that people might lose a and about, and there's usually going to be an organisational plan in place for dealing with that. If it's a bring your own device policy, obviously this opens up some different concerns, because it's the learner's own device. And what some organisations are doing is that they have an organisational agreement, where they put in place what's known as a mobile device management system, so they can basically wipe things from their device, from the learner's personal device, remotely if the learner reports it missing, and they usually sign some sort of agreement with the learner that they will be allowed to do this, and that the learner has an obligation to report it missing. I think it's also worth remembering that learning is only one part of bring your own device, and quite often people are starting to use their own devices for various other things that are more directly work related. So they may already, the IT department may already be developing protocols around people using their own devices for work, which the learning and development department can actually adapt and use.
Absolutely, and if they're not, there should be, because this goes well beyond learning, as you say. People do use devices for everything to do with work. It's a potential minefield for security. So it's not just something that concerns us. Great little observation from Burak. My opinion, if a in-class training is a lunch and an e-learning is a dinner, then mobile learning should be snacks which support the main meals. Very nice idea.
I would agree with that, certainly.
Okay, so
makes a lot of sense.
the questions we've asked here, some of them have been answered already. So we've got Rich asked about whether, actually no, sorry, a question from Richard wasn't answered. Who's asking for mobile learning? Is it the learners? Is it the organisation? Whose idea is it in the first place with your clients?
That's a very good question. I think it's a bit of both, really. Certainly, if you ask learners, they're usually pretty keen to have mobile learning, particularly if they're mobile workers. And sometimes it's the training and development department who are perhaps far-sighted and can see how it would be useful. But they're often doing that in a dialogue with their learners. It's obviously beneficial to people who haven't perhaps been able to access learning technology support previously because they don't sit and work at desks, so e-learning isn't ideal for them. E-learning isn't the flexible option that it is for a desk worker if you have to come into a special room in order to do it. So a lot of workers who haven't previously perhaps really used e-learning are starting to move into mobile learning. So that might be people, for example, people who are being trained by chains of restaurants, franchises, people who are working in shops on the shop floor, who previously had perhaps training packs delivered to them in paper format. And obviously in the NHS they have a large number of mobile workers who are interested in being able to access learning from their mobile devices. So it's particularly where people have a lot of mobile workers where you're seeing the demand being highest, but also for people who are on the move who just want that flexibility to access from anywhere.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. I was just looking at the chat there. Lots of people talking about how increasingly organisations are issuing tablets to their own people. Last night here at the conference I was chatting with a woman from HCT in Dubai who I think did the largest single roll of tablets to students there. 19,000 tablets, I believe.
Wow.
Okay, so...
When yeah, no, that's interesting. Doing the case study report, we looked at a university in Brazil, and they started issuing tablets to all their, I think, legal students in about 2011, and that they basically they actually custom made the tablets, and they started off delivering the textbooks or sections of textbooks to learners via the tablets, and they gave all the students who enrolled at the university their own tablets. So that's, I think that's something we're going to be seeing increasingly across organisations.
Comment here, the difficulty is getting somebody to accept that thought, the person who writes the checks internally, when these people probably already have their own device, and usually the sale is made in terms of these people are going to get paper products that is costly to produce, expensive to ship, much easier to do if we use a tablet. So that's why it tends to work very well in the academic space.
Yeah. And I think also perhaps for the shop floor, I was going to say, and perhaps for the shop floor where they've been having to ship large and heavy bundles of paper on a regular basis. That's another good reason for doing it.
I should explain to everybody, I'm not habitually rude and just interrupting Imogen. I'm actually Skyping into this. There's a slight delay, so I'm coming in a couple of seconds after she's speaking, which is why we are interrupting each other, or I'm interrupting her. Quick thought, I think we'll wrap up with this one, about gamification, because Michelle Parry-Slater said there was an issue about gamification and introducing a leaderboard into Asia. Didn't seem to be working. Lots of feedback from other people in the forum saying, like from Brian and from Richard and others, saying it may be that it was the not the gamification itself, but the idea of a leaderboard in that particular country didn't work because it was seen as being disrespectful to be above, to show yourself as being higher up than other people in the organisation, particularly your hierarchical superiors. I just wanted to have that observation that often we obsess about the technology. Sometimes the technology isn't the issue, there's something else going on in the organisation that's learning which has nothing to do with technology at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that completely. And gamification is an interesting one, and always provokes quite a lot of debate, because I think there's a spectrum between sort of taking things from games that are viewed as motivational, like points and leaderboards, or actually designing a sort of game mechanic that has an educational element in there. And how useful leaderboards and points always are is a moot question, and I think it really does depend on your audience, and I would definitely recommend piloting any approach like that with your audience. But yeah, that's a really interesting thought, that it may not work, certainly in every culture and under every circumstance.
Meanwhile, in the chat session, we have a increasingly falling price point on tablets. Coming down to Carphone Warehouse tablet, £49, which is what, 60 euros, 70 euros? It's astonishing, isn't it? Next year, these things will be given away free with certain promotional devices, I'm sure. We've hit the end of the program, and I have to say, this for me has been almost an ideal webinar. Imogen came in with fantastic content, bags of it, squeezed into something like 35 minutes, but not delivered at all in a rush. Very concise, plenty of value there. And Ian, quite rightly saying, please remind me, where can I go to get the recording of this? Because after all, there's been so much going on. Who will want to go back and catch up? Let me just put the URL into the text chat area there. Okay, so, learningandskillsgroup.com. If you've enjoyed it, please do tell the world about it on Twitter using hashtag LSG webinar. And I agree with you, I think it was very interesting stuff here based on what Epic and Imogen have been doing in the real world, not just hand waving, really practical advice, fantastic stuff. Our next webinars are going to take place, here's where we can collect different skillsgroup.com. The recording, the slides, the web, all on there. I'll say from Monday, possibly, certainly from Monday. And Dankeschön says, it's my pleasure. Next webinars will be 19th December, our Christmas special. We'll have again one at 10 o'clock, one at 12 o'clock. I hope I can see you there, virtually. Just remains for me to give my thanks to those who participated. Great shipping, loads of ideas, fabulous URLs and resources to share, and of course all stimulated by the wonderful Imogen Casebourne. Imogen, thank you very much.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Look forward to seeing you on the 19th. Until then, have a great couple of weeks. Bye for now.